The Appalachian Trail is a place of wonder, introspection, and discovery. Many hikers travel on the Appalachian Trail each year, and most go through unscathed. However, sometimes the Appalachian Trail turns deadly. Tonight, we will cover 3 stories of heinous murders that have taken place on or around the Appalachian Trail. Case number 1, Joel Polson. Low Gap Shelter, Chattahoochee National Forest, North Georgia, May 1974. Joel Eugene Polson was a 26-year-old photography enthusiast from Hartsville, South Carolina. Traveling with him was Margaret McFadden Harrod, just 17 years old, from Sumter, South Carolina. They were not romantically involved. They were just friends, but they were very trusting of each other. They set out on the Appalachian Trail across the wooded ridges of North Georgia, looking for peace, perhaps looking for answers. That evening, in the spring of 1974, they stopped for the night at a shelter known as Low Gap Shelter in the Chattahoochee National Forest. It was quiet, peaceful. The shelter was a welcome relief after a long day of strenuous hiking. As the sun began to set, a stranger showed up. He introduced himself as Ralph. Ralph was older, weathered, rough around the edges, but not threatening, just different. They made some food, ate by the fire. Ralph shared some of their food, made small talk. He even gathered firewood for him. But it turns out Ralph was not just a lonely traveler. His real name was Ralph Howard Fox, a drifter with no fixed home, a man battling inner demons perhaps, and he would soon become the Appalachian Trail's first confirmed murderer. At dawn, Joel woke up and went down to the stream to wash his hands and face. As he was walking back from the stream, when he was near the fire pit, Fox pulled out a .38 pistol, shot Joel dead, right in the head. Then he returned to the camp, ambushed Margaret, tied her up, blindfolded her, and forced her to hike deeper into the wilderness with him. They moved on for days through the Georgia backcountry. Margaret was terrified, alone. She didn't know if she was going to live or die. Her life was hanging by an unraveling thread. At the whim of Ralph Howard Fox, she could die any moment. But in a moment no one fully understands, Fox decided to let her go. He boarded a bus to Atlanta. She boarded a bus to Columbia, South Carolina. There she contacted law enforcement. They found Joel's body buried under some leaves and sticks and part of a trash bag he was stuffed into. Days later, they found Fox, arrested him. He confessed and pled guilty to murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. But the justice system didn't hold. Fox was paroled after only 15 years, and he murdered again. This time, a lady in Ohio. Then he was put back in prison and eventually died in prison. Since that spring of 1974, hikers say that Low Gap Shelter has never felt quite right. The birds don't sing there like they do elsewhere. The stream runs just a little too quietly, and sometimes hikers report a strange stillness that falls over the hollow. as if the forest itself remembers what happened. Some say that they hear distant sobbing late at night. Others leave wildflowers near the shelter without a word. The trail doesn't forget, it just waits. Case number 2, Janice Balza, Van Deventer Shelter, Appalachian Trail, East Tennessee, April 1975. She was alone, but never afraid. Janice Balza, a 22-year-old woman from Wisconsin, had been making steady progress along the Appalachian Trail. Her boots were worn smooth from the hundreds of miles she had already trekked. It was the spring of 1975, and the trail, still mostly isolated wilderness in those days, offered beauty, challenge, and a test of personal strength and stamina. That night, Janice rested at Van Deventer Shelter, a remote wooden lean-to perched on Iron Mountain, East Tennessee. The view overlooked Watauga Lake, breathtaking in daylight, haunting by twilight. Janice prepped her evening meal, settled in, and she let the silence of the forest wrap around her like a blanket. Then he arrived. His name was Paul W. Bigley. Paul was a 51-year-old drifter from Arizona with a fractured mind, and he had no business on the Appalachian Trail. To Janice, he must have seemed like just another odd but lonely traveler, the kind that hikers sometimes meet and part ways with before sunset. But Bigley wasn't just passing through. He lingered, he waited. Then, when Janice was distracted by her fire, he took the hatchet from her own backpack and killed her with it. The blow was swift. He struck over and over, wounded her fatally. Seems that Bigley wanted Janice's gear, her backpack, and her sense of freedom. Bigley then walked out of the forest and into the Carter County Sheriff's Office, and he confessed that he had murdered poor Janice up on the trail. The Sheriff's Department later hiked in and recovered Janice's body. Bigley was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Since then, the years have passed, but Van Deventer's shelter never forgot. Hikers who sleep there today report an eerie hush that descends on the area after sundown. Birds go quiet. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. Some claim they feel someone watching them from just beyond the tree line. Some claim that they feel the ghost of Janice in that very spot. More than one long-distance hiker has awakened there with tears in their eyes, unsure why, but they know they felt something, and every so often, someone leaves a small white flower tucked into the shelter's wooden beams. They never say who it's for, but they don't have to say. Everybody knows it's for Janice. Case number 3, serial killer Randall Lee Smith. The woods near Dismal Creek in southwestern Virginia are steep, dark, and unforgiving. Most hikers who pass through remember the gurgle of the creek, the sharp ridgeline above, and the unsettling stillness that creeps in after sunset. Because in May of 1981, 2 young social workers from Maine, Robert Montford Jr. age 27, and Laura Susan Ramsey, age 27, were making their way along the Appalachian Trail as through hikers. They were hiking in an effort to raise money for disabled children, mentally challenged children who they worked with back home in Maine. That night they stopped near what is now known as Wapiti Shelter. They had dinner and were resting, preparing for the next day's hike. But that night, someone was watching from the trees. His name was Randall Lee Smith, also 27 years old. So isn't that interesting? All three are age 27. Maybe that has something to do with the curse of 27, but that applies to rock stars, so that's a whole other story. So anyway, Randall Lee Smith, he was a local from Parisburg, Virginia. He wasn't a hiker, he wasn't lost, and he wasn't friendly. In fact, Randall Lee Smith was a straight-up predator. That night, Smith ambushed the couple. He shot Montford point blank, killed him instantly. Then he turned to Ramsey, stabbed her repeatedly over and over. When he was done, he stuffed them into their sleeping bags, pried up the floorboards in Wapiti Shelter, and put them underneath the floorboards, closed the whole thing back up. Then he went back into the woods, got in his truck, drove to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and he did something to get himself arrested in Myrtle Beach. And while the cops were searching his truck, they found a note written by Smith that in part read, "This boy and this girl have been so nice to me. It's going to be a shame when I have to get rid of them. But by the time I do, this truck will be gone and I'll be long gone." So he was very confident that he wouldn't get caught. Now, I'm not sure what he did to get arrested in Myrtle Beach, but it was a good thing that he did. So he was extradited back to Virginia. Virginia police went out to the area with cadaver dogs, and they did find the bodies underneath the shelter. Then Smith was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. But in a deal that infuriated many, Smith received only 30 years, 2 sentences to be served concurrently, not consecutively. He served just half of that, 15 years, before he was released on parole for good behavior in 1996. And the trail went quiet until he came back. On May 6th, 2008, nearly 27 years to the day, there's that 27 again, after his first murders, Randall Lee Smith returned to the same stretch of the trail, same forest, same creek, same darkness. He encountered 2 fishermen, Scott Johnston and Sean Farmer. They'd driven out to Dismal Creek to camp and cast some lines, unaware of the killer in their midst. Randall Lee Smith was a cold and calculating predator. He acted very friendly, shared a meal, shared some drinks, had some laughs, told Johnston and Farmer stories about the woods around there, some lore and legends, got real nice with them. Then he pulled out a .22 pistol, started shooting at the guys. Johnston was shot in the neck and back, and Farmer took a bullet to the chest and head. Fortunately, both these boys were quite large, and they did survive. They jumped in the pickup truck of one of the other of the guys, I'm not sure which, sped off down the hill, and they just happened to remember that they knew an acquaintance near there, a young lady. They went to her house, called the cops. Cops got involved, and old Smith, he took off in one of the other pickups, and unbeknownst to him, he was pursued by a state trooper. As soon as he saw the trooper, he freaked out, started speeding, lost control of the truck, wrecked it. Apparently got hurt pretty bad because he died in jail only 4 days later. So he never had to go back to trial for his final act of senseless violence. So the man who had haunted the Appalachian Trail for decades was gone. The Wapiti shelter was completely rebuilt after the 1981 murders, but hikers say something about the area, particularly that shelter, still just feels wrong. A chill settles in early in the evening. Campers report whispers just beyond the trees, or the sense of being followed even when they know they're alone. Some claim to hear Susan's voice calling out faintly, or footsteps pacing just outside their tents. More than a few skip that section of the trail altogether, not out of fear, but out of respect. They say the forest knows, and the forest remembers.